Shalom, shalom. First and foremost, I'd like to say call Alayim Yahweh, Bahashem, Yahweh Shai, Bahashem, Rakakadash. Double honors to the apostles and the elders of the great millstone who taught us the truth. Double honors to them. Shalom and salutations to the hopeful elect Akim out there spreading the gospel throughout the four corners of the earth in sincerity and truth and presenting your bodies as a living sacrifice, as the scripture teaches us to do wherever you may be. Shalom to the very, very, very few, and I do mean very few sisters that do listen up as well. I'm the brother Yarmaya from the Great Millstone Chicago camp coming back to you with another lesson. And this lesson, is concerning our heritage. It was basically brought about, by the brother Shatia. He had went overseas. He does that a lot, and he goes into the churches, those ancient spots, look at the relics, the paintings, that's still intact, and they had the dark. It shows that we was over there. We ruled that land for 1,000 years, man. We were in that land for a very long time, and we was on that part of the earth in general as longer than we were on this side of the earth. And Esau's a piece of trash, because he has a thing called iconoclasm, and that's just prophecy that's what he would go do, where he paint his images. He give you that white, that busk, that pale Edomite busk of Cesare Borgia, Serapis Christus, which disassociates a lot of our people from the Bible. But this is our heritage, and it matters, man. But, the brother goes into those churches and see all those relics. Then you got all those statues, man. We've been going into this for years, too, man, here at Great Millstone. A lot of these guys get on Instagram and take the shit that they learn from us, monetize. It don't talk about Israel or nothing, but a lot of this history that, the apostles, the elders, a Great Millstone been going into for years, especially, brothers like the elder bishop, the elder bro Tazadak Bar, the beloved elder Malcolm, all the apostles, bringing out those classic pieces, but nevertheless, the Lord is a so-called black man, all right, with woolly hair. The holy angels aren't butt-naked babies, because this white man getting the scriptures, and look, this man is just the devil, He's the accuser of our brethren. He wants the scriptures to be related to him on the site where he getting salvation. But he understands and knows that his time is running out, and he ain't getting no fucking salvation. Pursuing in Hebrews 12 and 16, but nevertheless, this is scripture. This is Job 9 and verse 24. It says, the earth is given into the hands of the wicked. He covered the faces of the judges thereof. If not, where and who is he? So this man, even though the Arabs eating camels and shit, and these gooks eating turtle dick soup, they not putting themselves up as the Lord. They not saying they the holy angels, all right? They not saying they the Israelites of the Bible. Nobody's doing that blasphemous wickedness but Esau, Edom. All right. This is First Maccabees 1 and verse 48. It said, and laid open the book of the law, wherein the heathen had sought to paint the likeness of their images. That's iconoclasm. And that's what these heathens did. And these heathens that did this were the Edomites all throughout time. All right. They tie you up. Look at how they got the Latinos going crazy. The northern kingdom of Israel going crazy over that busk. That's why, we always brought out those books like Russian icons, Nature Knows No Color Lines, a lot of them. A lot of them. I got a couple of them in here. Babylon, the Timbuktu, books that really brought out who we were, and can confirm those relics that's still over there, if that's the right word for it, that's still over there today. You still got in Spain, the Castle of the Moors, with all those pictures on them. But see, this is Esau. This is what Esau does, man. Esau, I'm going to read it again. This is First Maccabees 1. Salaki, First Maccabees 3 and 48, it say, and lay open the book of the law, wherein the heathen had sought to paint the likeness of their images. And they did that all throughout the time. You know, you go to the scriptures. We always go into the Moors, you know, the Crusaders, you know, the Dark Ages, you know, and things like that. But we talk about Mozart all the time, Beethoven all the time. You know goddamn well there wasn't no so-called white man over there, man. And we believe heavily in that, in our history and our heritage and those relics, and especially other more things, you know, the ancient, more ancient than that, you know. It's key that it be known that that's us, because look, look how crazy niggas look at us when we tell them we the prophets, man. Just look how crazy a nigga look at you, you know. A nigga can't believe that a so-called black man with woolly hair is coming out the sky to save him, man. He can't believe this. You seen that? You remember that episode of Good Times when JJ showed the mama and shit, and she said, "It's the only Jesus I know." Not to say that word. I hate to say that word. You know. And Salaki, if I'm ratting, man, let me get to it. This is 2 Thessalonians 2:1. It says, "Now we beseech you, brethren, by the coming of our Lord Yahushua Mashiach, and by the gathering unto him, that ye be not soon shaken in mind, or be troubled, neither in spirit, nor by the word, for thou, Salaki, nor by letter, as it was from us, that the day of Mashiach is at hand. Let no man deceive you by any means, for that day shall not come except a great falling away, except there come a falling away first." So we had to lose our heritage. Jeremiah, what's that? I think it's 17. Said we shall be discontinued from our heritage. But that went about by the hand of the so-called white man. When Yahweh Ba'ashem Yahushua comes back, we will be caught in the hands of this devil. But a great falling away has to come first. Part of that falling away, the biggest part of that, is us forgetting who we are, who our power is, you know. And with this witchcraft that Esau portray in these movies to this day in Hollywood, you know, and that's what I was gonna say. Salaki from all over the place. That's what I was gonna say with that Mozart and Beethoven. You just know that's a nigga back in the reincarnation. It's Kanye West, you know, Prince or a motherfucker like that. Ain't no Edomite. I was gonna say that. You know, once again, Salaki if I'm ratting. But that's real shit, man. You wasn't no fucking Edomites over there. You know, you got Shakespeare. He wrote one of my best ones, the Othello, the Moor of Venice. Ain't no Edomite making no story about no you know, a black man popping a white woman. Romeo and Juliet, you know. These are Israelite stories, so-called Negro stories, man. We were over there in whooping ass in totality, you know. And let me get back to this. It said that ye be not soon shaken in mind, or be troubled, neither by spirit or by word, nor by letter, as from us, as in the day of Mashiach is at hand. Let no man deceive you by any means, but for that day shall not come, except there come a falling away first, and that man of sin be revealed, the son of perdition. And everybody should know now that's the so-called white man, you know. It says, who opposed it and exalted himself above all that is called God. No, but the Chinese man didn't do that. The Hamites didn't do that. Only Esau did that. He said it, I will be like unto the Most High. All right? And he's the one that puts all this witchcraft and like the Elder Malcolm always say, how they make the Vikings with blonde hair and blue eyes and shit in movies. You know, bugged out shit like that. You know, but don't know the real history of the Scots, you know, the Celts, you know, the Gauls, hey, the Moors, the Crusaders, you know, because of Esau's witchcraft, man, because of that Renaissance art, you know. But like I said, this lesson is spawned, you know, off the brother going over there and showing the art. But the stuff like that matters. It really matters. It said, let no man deceive you. But it proves that the Lord, that this man is the devil and that he would do this. Nobody else did this. Let no man deceive you by any means, for that day shall not come except there come a falling away first, And that son of sin shall be revealed, the son of perdition, who opposed and exalted himself above all that is called God or that is worshipped, so that he, as God, sitteth in the temple of God. And his last big move with that Godplex identity is going to be to issue the MOTB, man. It's going to be the issue the MOTB, man. That's going to be his last strike. And we see that coming into play every day. All right, it says, so that he, as God, sitteth in the temple of God, showing himself that he is God. You know, that's the so-called white man. He had to be revealed who he was, man. That demon, man. That great deceiver that went out through the earth, man. All right. That's been all throughout the earth wreaking havoc since the garden. All right, but his human counterpart is the so-called white man. He operates heavily. You know, you got the sons of the devil. You got three classifications of men on the planet. You got the sons of God, the sons of the Most High. You know, you so-called Negroes, Latinos, and Native Americans, you'll see this been scattered abroad. They may look like the other nations, but you Negroes, you Latinos, and you Native Americans, you know, are the sons of the Most High. You know, then you have the sons of men. Then you have the sons of the devil. The so-called white man is definitely the son of the devil. All right. What is this? What I'm looking for. Yeah, this 28. Because I said he been around from the garden. All right. Where's that part I need? Salaki. Yep, here you go. Yep, here you go right here. It says, wreaking havoc. This man has been wreaking havoc from the beginning. This is Ezekiel 28:13. It says, Thou hast been in Eden, the garden of Yahweh. Every precious stone was thy covering, and sardius and topaz and the diamond, the beryl, the onyx, the jasper, the sapphire, the emerald, the cumbernacle, and gold, and the workmanship of thy tablets, and of thy pipes was prepared thee in the day that thou was created. All right, it says, Thou art the anointed cherub that covereth. Think back to the Job 9:24. He covered the faces of the judges thereof. If not, where and who is he? This is that same demon, man. All right, it says, Thou art the anointed cherub that covereth, and I have set thee so. Thou was upon the holy mountain of God. Thou hast walked up and down in the midst of the stones of fire. Thou wert perfect in thy ways from the day that thou was created until iniquity was found in thee. And like the beloved elder Apostle Gabar say, man, this man has been a complete, perfect devil. It says, By the multitude of thy merchandise they have filled the midst of thee with violence, and thou hast sinned. Therefore I will cast thee as a profane out of the mountain of God, and I will destroy thee, O covering cherub, in the midst of the stones of the fire. All right. So it ain't no getting away that this man is the devil. All right. You know, he set out to take Jake heritage away, Jake culture, and Jake whole the beloved apostle Elder Tahar did a lesson a couple years ago called going into the God gene. This is why Esau pushes homosexuality, adultery, lesbianism, and feminism, you know, amongst you Jakes, man. You know, because he understands that he's took away the ability from you niggas to see yourself as God, you know. And going back to that imagery, you can't see yourself in a position, you know, like the apostles always going to that God complex, man. Not that God complex, but yeah, that for real too. But that ruling class mind state, you know. And you know, that's all part of Esau's witchcraft, you know. We are not ignorant of Satan's devices. But this man has been the devil from the beginning, showing strife, hating. You know, now the whole world is finding out he a bitch ass nigga. You know, his women, we make sure his women don't, you know, his women don't want him at all, you know. They gonna make sure they let us know that too. And we gonna capitalize off that. His children don't want to be him, you know. And the whole world is seeing this man for the devil that he is, man. You know, but I just want to go into Esau's witchcraft, you know, and that imagery. But with that being said, I want to say call aloud in how Bashim how Shai Bashim Kakadash. You know, hopefully the rant was edifying. You know. Double honors to the apostles and the elders, you know, and to the hopeful elect brothers out there enduring Shalom.